Okay, so the first thing you have to do is have everything off to one side, and you want to leave your square term positive. So I'm going to subtract 30w and add 25 to both sides, like this, minus 30w plus 25. So I'm going to get 9w squared minus 30w plus 25 equals 0, because these cancel out, so you get 0. Now the first thing I notice, I have to factor the left-hand side, but the first thing I notice is the 9 is a perfect square and the 25 is a perfect square. So we're going to test it to see if we can use our perfect squares for factoring. The square root of 9 is 3, and we have a w. Then you write down the next sign, the minus, and you take the square root of the last term. The square root of 25 is 5. Okay, to test and see if this really worked, you multiply everything you see together. So 2 times 5 is 10, times 3 is 30. If that equals the middle number, you have this factored. So since there's 2 of these, we only need one of them to actually solve, because otherwise we would just have repeating answers. So when you have something factored, you take the opposite of the constant. So the opposite of negative 5 is positive 5. And then anything stuck to the letter goes underneath as a denominator. So the answer to this one is 5 over 3. And that one's finished. The next one, I'm going to move 17w over by making it negative 17w. And I'm going to add a 6 to both sides. So negative 17w plus 6. So I'm going to get 5w squared minus 17w plus 6 equals 0, because these cancel out. Now, 5 is not a perfect square, so we can't use the same procedure that we used last time. So we actually have to factor this by grouping. So 5w squared minus 17w plus 6. What you do is you take the first and the last number and multiply them. So 5 times 6 equals 30. So 1 with the factors of 30, when you add them, equals 17. So 1 times 30 doesn't do it. 2 times 15. When you add those, you get 17. So what you do is you write down your first term and the sign after it. The biggest number that works comes next with a w. Okay, we have a negative 15. We want a negative 17, so you have to add a negative 2 to that. And then just copy down the positive 6. You group the first two terms. We can divide these by 5, and we can take a w out. So we have a 5 and 2 w's. We took a 5 and a w out, so that's a w left, and then a minus sign. 15 divided by 5 is 3. Bring down the sign that's after the parentheses, and look at what you have left. We can divide those by 2. So when you divide those by negative 2, you just get the same parentheses that you had before. So then you put them together as 5w minus 2 times w minus 3. Now, if it had not said solve, if it had just said factored, we'd be finished, but it did say solve. So what you want to do is you want to take the opposite of the constant. The opposite of negative 2 is positive 2, and anything stuck to your w just gets written as a denominator, comma, and this one, the opposite of negative 3 is positive 3, and you don't have anything stuck to your w. So you've got your two answers, 2/5 and 3. Okay, the next one, we have to move the 2w over by making it a negative 2w, and that's going to go in the middle because it's w. So I've got 3w squared minus 2w minus 5 equals 0. They are not perfect squares, so I have to factor by grouping. 3w squared minus 2w minus 5. You take the first and the last number and subtract them. So 3 times 5 is 15. So we want the factors of 15 that when you subtract them equal 2, and that would be 3 times 5, because when you subtract those you get 2. You bring down the first term and the sign after it, 3w squared. You use your largest number in the combination that worked, so that's going to be a 5w. We have a negative 5w, we want a negative 2w, so we have to add 3w to get that. And then the minus 5 at the end, you just write that down. You group the first two terms together. We can take a w out of there. So then we get 3w minus 5. Because we had a 3 and 2 w's, we took a w out, so that's a 3 and 1 w left. You have a minus sign. And then we have a 5 and a w, but they took the w out, so you got a 5 left. You bring down the plus sign after the parentheses. Look at what you have left. There's nothing in common that you can take out of there, so you have to put a 1. You carry over the first parentheses. You put your answers together. What's outside the parentheses has to go together, and what they had in common has to go together. We're solving so it's equal to 0. So then you take the opposites. The opposite of positive 1 is negative 1, and the opposite of negative 5 is positive 5. The 3 that's stuck to the W goes underneath. So you have your two answers, negative 1 and 5/3.